Are we skipping the after show?
I really have to go to the bathroom, and that
Oh,
it's welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave, and today we are discussing the TV show Hannibal. I'm Julia, and on the forums I am No True Lady, and today I'm joined by three other podcasters. We have Tori with us,
Hi, I'm Tori. I'm not on the VOK forums. My URL is Last Rat Standing on Tumblr.
and then we have Nadine with us.
Hi, I'm Irenese on the forum, on the podcast Vice and Fire forums. And I've also got a Tumblr, but yeah, and it's the same name, Irenese.
And last but not least, we have Nadia.
hi guys, I'm Nadia on the forums as well. No Tumblr.
All right, so I just wanted to tell everyone to give themselves a pat on the back before we start because going from Greenwich Mean Time, we have someone in England, someone in Pakistan, someone in California, and someone in Pennsylvania. So technology, this is amazing, you guys. It's actually so important in this fandom because, and I think this is something that Tori can speak to, is it is so hard to find other people who like this show. You have to go online because it's like really an acquired taste.
Oh, very much so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cannibalism joke.
I don't know anyone who would like this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's amazing that that other people do like it. But to that end, actually, Tori and I started a podcast for Hannibal called Suits and Madness, which can be found on iTunes, and also we run the Tumblr suits-and-madness.tumblr.com, and I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with our existing fans and reaching new fans through VOK. But just to jump in here, I just wanted to quickly give a synopsis of what Hannibal is about for all the listeners who don't know. It's a TV show that premiered on NBC this year, and it airs internationally on various other networks. And it's a adaptation of the well-known Hannibal Lecter series, which was originally some books written by Thomas Harris, an American author, and it has turned into 5 movies at this point. And the TV show was created by Brian Fuller, who is also an American TV producer who is known for shows like Pushing Daisies and Dead Like Me, which are also cult shows. And they've updated the material for a modern audience. And the show intertwines this very unsettling relationship between an FBI profiler named Will Graham, who is played by Hugh Dancy, a.k.a. Mr. Claire Danes, and a psychiatrist, Hannibal Lecter, who is played by, well, I'm going to try to do the correct pronunciation for his name, Mads Mikkelsen. That's according to a Danish friend of mine. And in the background of this very twisted friendship they develop over the course of the first season, Will is trying to do his job of solving murders. But only the audience knows that Hannibal is not only manipulating Will, but he is also a serial killer, and he is responsible for some of the murders that Will helps investigate. And the show is also, it's really, really violent, it's really, really graphic, but it's also extremely artistic. It features really strong acting performances and a really strong, endearing supporting cast. And that's pretty much the main reason it has gained a cult following. But I wanted to just sort of start with a roundtable discussion of why we all got interested in the show. So I guess whoever wants to start with that.
I'll give it a go.
Okay.
I was a fan of the books by Thomas Harris. I read pretty much all of them, even including, and I mean the book Hannibal itself is, I think, probably where most of the, I guess, inspiration, the spiritual inspiration for the program is, because there are actual, pages in the book that I had to skip over because they were really, really disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of find it ironic to myself that I'm okay watching most of it, but reading it, obviously, my mind is that much more terrifying than TV. But yeah, I was always a fan of the characters in the books. So to get and obviously what I heard that Mads Mikkelsen,
Yes.
Mikkelsen, yeah. When I heard that he was playing it, the first thought it was like, oh, I don't know, because obviously we've grown up watching Anthony Hopkins portraying Hannibal, but this is Hannibal of sort of later years. But because I've seen Mads in I've just forgotten the name of that movie. What was that name of that movie? Sorry, I'm just asking my husband for the name of that. Valkyrie, right?
Valhalla Rising.
Valhalla Rising, and it's weird because that movie. He doesn't speak a word. It's all very much in his actions and his facial expressions. And after sort of seeing that movie, and then obviously when I heard that he was going to be playing Hannibal, all of a sudden it clicked into place. It was like, oh yes, of course. I mean, somebody who's portraying a character who is very much in people's minds. It's kind of interesting to see that a lot of is not spoken. It's how he says things. It's gestures that he makes. It's speech patterns. It's all it does play very well into sort of how I've imagined Hannibal would be if he was a real person.
Yeah, and that's because Mads Mikkelsen is a classically trained dancer. Like that's where he started out in the performing arts. And I think that's like why he's such a good actor, is because his whole instrument is his body, so to speak.
Yeah, for him, it's not just the delivering of lines. It's he inhibits the character. So I mean, he moves like Lecter. He sounds like Lecter. He doesn't just speak the lines, so to speak.
That's a really good observation. Anyone else want to chime in about why this show grabbed you?
I can go next. Again, I was a fan of the books. I've read all of them. And I just heard that there was a TV series based on the books, and I just started watching it. I've never actually watched the Anthony Hopkins. I mean, I've watched them in bits and pieces, but I've never watched the entire movies. So this was very interesting, and especially because this isn't actually based on the books. It's more of what happened before it, because in the books there's not a lot of explanation on how Hannibal was actually captured the first time around. At least I don't remember it being there. So I was very interested. And it gives us a lot of insight about Hannibal's character instead of what he's done, which is what the books explain until the last one, like Ernie's explained. So I just started watching it, and I loved it. It's very graphic, but I enjoyed it.
So Tori, I guess that means your turn is next.
Yes. So my intro to Hannibal, it's going to be kind of funny, honestly. I never read the books. I never watched the movies. It was just, I'm on Tumblr quite often, and it kept showing up on my dash. All of these people who I follow, who I'm subscribed to, loved it, and it kept showing up, and it kept showing up. And I couldn't Tumblr savior it because they weren't tagging it. I was like, you know what? If you can't beat them, join them. So I'll watch an episode. And I didn't really like the pilot, to be honest. I didn't really care for it. So I was like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? I can't unfollow all these people. I don't know. So, and then the next week, there was another episode that came out, and there were gift sets all over my dash and all these pictures. I'm like, okay, one more try. I'll just give it one more try. So I watched the second episode, and I loved it. I don't know what it was that was different about the second episode, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I started getting more involved. And after, I'd say about the 5th episode or so of the first season, I'd bought all the books, I'd watched all the movies, I was all caught up with the Harris canon, so to speak. And it just, something about the show, really, after that second episode, I really got sucked in.
I never trust the pilot.
Yeah, so many things change between the pilot and then the rest. I mean, for example, Game of Thrones, there's like this lost pilot out there where like half the actors are different that was shot in 2010. But yeah, so that's, yeah. My intro to the show was actually very similar to Tori's, that we're on Tumblr, and at some point, like middle of April this year, I'd say, all this stuff about Hannibal started showing up on my dash. And at first I thought it was a joke because some of the ads were, they were made to look like a formal invitation to a dinner party. Like you are cordially invited. And at first I thought it was just like someone had just made something based on the Hannibal overall story. Like it was just some like image someone had made, and I was like, huh, that's funny. And then I saw this image show up with Mads Mikkelsen, and I'm like, that guy real. And again, I still thought it was a joke. And then, as Tori said, the gifts started showing up. The people talking about, oh my God, I've seen this show, and it's getting inside my head. And at this time, my son was, he was still only like not quite 2 months old. So I was spending a lot of time just sitting on my couch watching him sleep in his bassinet. So I just watched the first episode on a whim, one boring afternoon, and that was it for me. I was like, this is so good. Why is no one watching this?
It's funny that you also, because that you obviously heard about it, because it was in the UK, we sometimes get programs after after in the States, quite famously with Game of Thrones. There's that sort of a week, or started out as a week, and then it sort of generally shrunk down to I think the day after. But we make a point, me and my husband, of when we know that there's when the new season in the States is starting up, we go to sort of YouTube and we start looking up sort of each of the individual big cable stations and start looking at what promos they start running. And Hannibal was one that instantly kind of grabbed our attention, and we kind of went, oh, we're so going to watch this. Because we're both fan of the books, we've both seen the movies. So for us, it was like a no-brainer. That's how we came across it. We actually sort of stumbled across it by mistake. And then, of course, afterwards we saw that Sky would be running it. But because we're not cable subscribers, we didn't have access to it initially. So we had to find other means, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, same here. We actually have not owned a television in several years, and my husband and I both went to a tech school, which is where we met, and we're just accustomed to doing workarounds for lots of things, shall we say. Like it was almost a mark of incompetence if you actually, paid for something. It's like, what, you bought Lord of the Rings? What are you doing? But I'm hearing a common thread in all of our stories of discovering the show, that it was not like we were, per se, just like watching the nightly news and it came on. Like it came to us through the internet. Like Nadine, you said you were watching YouTube, and for, me and Tori, we were in a place that talks about television and movies a lot. But we weren't really like looking for a new TV show to watch. And then Nadia, where did you first see the promo for it?
I don't think I saw the promo. I just saw it mentioned somewhere, and obviously Hannibal, I figured it was somehow related to the books, to the Thomas Cyrus books, so I just started watching it. And obviously, I'm in Pakistan, so Game of Thrones, the first season, we got it in November of 2011. That was, I think, 8 months after it ran in USA. So it's, we always have to find other means to, watch series. Otherwise, we might never get to see them.
Yeah. I think it's a real testament to how technology has changed so much in recent years, and how the media industry has lagged behind. And it's like, look, guys, you have your audience. Like, for example, you can't like pay on the HBO site to just watch Game of Thrones. And there are so many people who are like, we would do that. We would happily.
Oh, I know we would, but it's just not available.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's sort of a little side commentary. But it sounds like we all kind of came to it through sideways means, if you will, like not through the conventional ways that the TV stations usually promote their new material. It just kind of, it snuck up on us and it threw a bag over our head and dragged us off into a van, basically.
And I don't think NBC has been promoting it very heavily. I don't know if anyone listening is a fan of Breaking Bad, but there's a new show that AMC is running that comes on after Breaking Bad, which is incredibly popular. And to see sneak peeks of Breaking Bad's next episode, you have to watch the new TV show. So I never saw NBC really promo Hannibal that heavily.
What's the new show? I'm just curious.
It's called Low Winter Sun.
I have not. Yeah, again, I haven't heard of it. Like, that's something that they're marketing through traditional means, and it's not reaching me. You know?
Yeah. It's a shame because, I mean, obviously, shows like Hannibal are very much an acquired taste. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I like the fact that it is so different from everything else. There are moments where, because of the aesthetic, it's very much like a graphic novel to me. It's like a moving graphic novel. There are some visuals that just strike me that way. They're more like art pieces than from a general what we know as TV kind of primetime TV.
Yeah.
And to me, that's something that I really like. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I love about the show. Actually, that segues nicely because I wanted to start talking about what things, moments in the show, anything in the show that has really stuck with us from this season that really, really solidified our fandom of it. I describe the show as being operatic. It is more like an opera than a real life, sort of police procedural like Law and Order, for example. It's nothing like that. And that feeling was really, really, really solidified for me in the episode 7, Sorbet, which opened with the opera performance. And I remember just sitting there, mouth open, like, this is it. This is it. This is art. And this is what they're trying to show us. Yeah. So that's like the talking about it as like a moving graphic novel, as like an opera. I think that's all very deliberate on the show's part, that's what they're going for. Did anyone want to chime in with like a specific moment in the show that really stood out for them?
I think I loved episode 3. It was just when, they take Abigail back to, I don't know, where was it? Minnesota, I think?
Her house in Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, the body on the deer head, who was that? What was her name? Cassie Boyle, I think?
Yes.
The one that Hannibal killed. The imagery, I know it's very, very graphic and it's very disturbing. It's just, that was a moment, I think I really enjoyed the whole episode, but especially, the details that Abigail gives about her father. It's just, how he honors the bodies and all of that. And you just don't take it very literally until she finds the hair in the pillow.
Oh, yeah, that was terrifying.
It's not very significant. It's just hair in a pillow, but, she actually meant it, honoring every part of the body. The guy actually used the hair to stuff pillows. It just kind of hits you then, That actually, I think even though the Cassie Boyle scene was very graphic, the hair in the pillow was actually much more disturbing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To me.
For sure. Because it's one of those things that it gets your imagination working. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's also just sort of, I may slip into a bit of bad language, but it's like that sort of, it gets right into your head, the idea that this person actually hunts humans. Mm-hmm. Like, what is more disturbing than that is they don't even see you as a person anymore. You are just sort of, you're like cattle, and that part
exactly,
just sort of messes with your head.
Yeah, like the way that, if someone does something to slight Hannibal, basically he takes them out of the human category in his head and puts them into the pig category and slaughters them accordingly.
There's definitely, and it's not just that but at the same time there is the one thing I have noticed is that he doesn't just, obviously a lot of times you were introduced to Hannibal's prediction for cannibalism by how he prepares the food, and obviously it's always after sort of a really graphic murder. You see him doing this beautiful sort of dish, and to a certain extent it's really funny because he doesn't. It sounds really. he almost reveres the person more as food than he
Yes.
does as a person. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
we're
that's
not
true.
we're not just cattle. We are Kobe beef, kind of, to his palate. And I mean
Yeah.
that just going through and looking at the episode names, it's, you know, even the episodes are, you know, it reads like a menu. So it's like almost like this really black humor that, you know, you've got this story of this sort of cannibal, and all of the names of the episodes have these very sort of fancy, very sort of upmarket sort of menu sort of titles.
Yeah, I do believe they're actually the traditional names for like a French multi-course dinner, like the really old-fashioned like 12-course dinner that, you know, most people don't do anymore. So
Yeah,
that's where they get the names from. And I guess if you
Yeah.
sort of look at each episode as a different course in a meal, you know, you sort of like see where they're sort of trying to like go like and set things up. Like for example, a pilot episode one is aperitif, which of course is the drink that you often are served, you know, at the
while waiting
beginning of
for dinner.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then episode two, amuse bouche, which is like the palate. Well, it's not really a palate cleanser, but it's like usually like a very small little morsel that like sometimes it's like even served in like a little tiny spoon to like sort of like perk you up for dinner. Like, ooh, that's interesting. You know.
I've heard it's in a lot of restaurants that still serve amuse bouche. It is sometimes, most of the time it's in pretty upscale restaurants, and it's almost considered like a pre-dinner sort of like the name says, it's just to tingle your taste buds.
Hmm.
You know, this is what and it's usually chosen by the head chef. So it's sort of almost like a showcase of what's in store for the rest of dinner. So it's kind of interesting that they've chosen sort of to do the titles of the episodes that way. And amuse bouche obviously is the first time I think that you actually um, really properly get to see what the hell Hannibal is.
Yes.
I mean, it's sort of hinted at in the first episode, and I don't think it's seen until sort of very close to the end. But obviously, episode two is the one where you see what Hannibal is really capable of.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good point. How, you know, linking together what an amuse bouche is and then what the content of the episode was. I like that.
I'm not half as smart as you think I am.
Oh, well, you're faking it very well. Keep going. I'll just chime in with a moment that has stuck for me. My favorite episode of the season is Sorbet. I rant about it all the time on the Suits and Madness Tumblr. Like anytime I reblog a GIF or an image from it, I always make sure to tag it as the best episode. But there's the moment where Hannibal is in his office by himself and he's waiting for Will to show up, and Will doesn't show up, and he kind of does this sort of like sad walk back to his desk, and the Lacrimosa from freaking Mozart is playing in the background, and then just as it crescendos into the final amen, we are suddenly in this dreamscape with Will and Abigail dressed in like hunting clothes or outdoorsy clothes, sitting on either side of one of the girls who Hannibal killed. It wasn't Cassie Boyle. It was the other one who was in the field.
Marissa Shore?
Yes, Melissa Shore. Yeah, and she's like lying in the middle of the field, mounted on the antlers, and you just have the choir just thundering over this scene. And, you know, again, this was another moment for me of just like, they are going for something huge. They are trying to make us see something here beyond what like normal TV shows do. And then the dialogue, and then Abigail's like looking at Will in this dreamy way, and she says, "Dad?" And he replies, "Yes." And then she says, "There's somebody else here." And you hear Hannibal's voice intruding, saying, "Will, Will." And yeah, and like that's for me one of the moments that Will is sort of realizing on the edge of his consciousness that maybe Hannibal was responsible for that particular murder. You know, he's the someone else who's there. But like that's also part of like the really sick dynamic that Abigail, and Hannibal develop over the course of the first season. So like that for me is like the ultimate Hannibal moment.
I really, really just love the stylistic choices in Hannibal, the lighting, the color palette. It's beautiful, and it's all very, very carefully selected. And that's something that I love about Hannibal, is just how fans will so often get into the very smallest details of analyzing. And I feel like Hannibal understands that, and everything is done very carefully. And with that in mind, that there's sort of a layer of meaning around all these individual aesthetic choices. My favorite point throughout the season was probably the interweaving of the Wendigo, and from the swag stag to the final episode. That was my favorite part of the finale, actually, was the ultimate Hannibal as the Wendigo symbolism. I really enjoyed how that flowed throughout the season, and that was just artistically, it was really creepy and really like morbidly beautiful in a way, how they did the final Hannibal as the Wendigo in Will's hallucination. And that was just, I really enjoyed that. That was something when I was watching that, when I saw that in the last episode, I turned around to my boyfriend and I was like, this is it. This is the best thing I have ever seen on television. This is just, and he was like, okay, Tori, that's nice.
Pat on the head. Here's your Klondike bar. Please go to bed. Yes.
I'm thinking more like back away slowly.
Are Nadine and Nadia, are you familiar with the Wendigo from Native American legend?
Nope.
Not that particular. I do know a little. I do know a few Native American sort of stories, but that's one I'm not familiar with.
Okay, I can just quickly spin that out. It's found, I think it's mostly among the Algonquin tribe, but like mostly in tribes that are in parts of the continent that have, like winter, like actual, like windy, snowy winter. And the Wendigo is a cannibalistic, malevolent demon spirit that possesses, the story goes that it possesses people during times of famine, and especially in the winter, when food is the scarcest, and induces them to commit cannibalism. Or the other version of that is if someone becomes desperate enough to commit cannibalism, even if it's someone who has already died and therefore their body is just, going to quote unquote go to waste, that they become a cannibal, rather they become a Wendigo. They become one of these restless spirits, and they're sort of doomed to wander around never being full. And they always are just trying to get food into themselves, but they never feel satiated. The connection with the Wendigo, has been there since episode 1, because one of the descriptions, because this legend is found across many different Native American tribes, there's different variations, but one of the ways a Wendigo is supposed to look is it's supposed to be, like an emaciated, like zombie-like creature, but also that it's like parts deer or parts stag. So the nightmare stag, or the swag stag as it's sometimes called in the fandom, has been there, literally stalking Will from episode 1. And when someone brought up the idea on Tumblr that this thing was actually not just symbolic of a Wendigo, but it is a Wendigo because Hannibal is a Wendigo. I just wanted to go and run around the block. I was so excited.
Oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And that makes everything sound a lot creepier.
Yeah, because another theory that's been floated is that Hannibal is a fairy tale that doesn't know it's a fairy tale, if that makes sense. Let's see here. I'm looking back at the outline. Unless anyone wanted to mention any other specific moments, we could move on to the relationships, which is, I think, the other big appeal for the fans.
I wanted to mention one thing that I didn't like, actually, because I'm a Debbie Downer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed within this season 1 that I hope they tone down in season 2, I felt that the weakest parts of the show were the police procedural type parts of the show, where you have a lot of the killer of the week type moments that I felt were kind of unnecessary and really didn't move the plot forward. I feel like the main meat, pardon the pun, of the plot is the relationship between Will and Hannibal, and when they had the things like the pharmacist who poisons diabetic patients, hides them in his trunk, and then turns them into mushrooms, and then is never seen again, that kind of took me out of the show a little bit. Like, I know there is the idea that it's supposed to be this sort of like fairy tale atmosphere, but that really like stressed my suspension of disbelief. Or the old guy who digs up dead bodies and builds pyramids on the beaches of West Virginia. Like, those for me were the weakest moments of the show, because I felt like they didn't bear any real importance to the parts of the plot that I was interested in.
Yes.
I think the problem is, though, is because obviously the storyline is that they are the BAU, and that he's, supposed to be investigating these crimes, that every so often you're going to have to kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, suffer through a bad crime scene.
Yeah.
But I know it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I mean, as much as, like you said, that the totem pole one just threw me sort of as being so unbelievably just made up. Like, that is far stranger than anything I would have thought anybody was capable of. And yet at the same time, as far as visually, it's one of my favorite ones, because it is just such a bizarre looking structure.
Yeah.
But I think
but how do you get the bodies on top of each other like that?
I think.
And see, when you think about it, it's very impractical.
Yeah, I mean, I can. There's so many movies and TV shows that, because my husband works in IT, setting up networks for government. Like, there's a lot of government projects that he works on, so he's got sort of quite high level classification. And some of the times that he can't watch a lot of the Bourne movies sometimes, because he just sits going, can't do that, that's fake. And it's just like, oh my God, just turn your brain off for a second and just enjoy the action. But yeah, I think if you scrutinize TV too much, you do kind of lose a little bit of the enjoyment factor. I mean, it's difficult with with things that are just so. I mean, I really wish that they. The thing that sort of tends to pull me out is that you've got Will Graham, who is supposed to be a trained investigator, and the way he walks through the crime scene sometimes is just you going, you'd never do that. You're compromising the crime scene in so many ways. There's basic sort of things that you would think that, procedures that you think it would follow, and they don't seem to. But obviously, that is artistic license.
Yeah.
They're taking.
Yeah, that's going back to how this show is more of an opera than a TV show. Like, another thing that takes me out sometimes is the therapy scenes, and that is not what it's like to be in therapy. But then I realize, I go back and I watch the actual conversation that Hannibal's having with Will or with Bedelia or with one of his patients, and it's like, no, this isn't a therapy scene. This is a dialogue. It's like a poetic dialogue the two people are having. And so the funny thing is that this show invites, a really strong level of scrutiny and attention from its audience, but then it's a double-edged sword. Then we see all these things that take us out of the show. Yeah.
I suppose it depends on how well they present it, because there are some artistic sort of little, cop-outs, which sometimes, like the totem pole. Okay, the totem pole crime scene was just, like Nadia said, how do you even begin to build something like that? How is that even possible? And then the other half of your brain going, but God, that is so insane to look at. And I think with this sort of program, especially because so much of Hannibal, the beauty of Hannibal is actually those really gorgeous, graphic, but artistically beautiful shots, that sometimes you do sort of kind of find yourself caught between, oh wow, that's so not able to happen. Like physics is such a bitch of a taskmaster, but yeah, that would never work in real life. And at the same time, but if it did, oh wow, it would look really good.
Yeah, and who knows, that could be a deliberate choice on the part of the show to mess with the audience that way, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I agree with Tori that I hope it's something that they smooth over better next season, because, you know, when that interplay of the character relationships and the killer of the week works, it really, really works. Like, I think the two standouts in my mind are Sorbet and Fromage. And, you know, the two for me that really didn't work were the Totem Pole and the Angel Maker episode, where it was just kind of like, oh, come on, you know, like just being taken out of the show. Do you guys want to move on to the next section now about the relationships?
Sure.
Well, that kind of works into what I was going to say, is that, you know, the episodes that seem to be where the killer is the weakest, they don't really shine any sort of insight onto the relationship between Hannibal and Will. So it's ironic that, you know, we'll forgive a bad crime scene as long as it, I suppose, somehow adds to the relationship between them. There's something which is brought to light about sort of the relationship between them, but at the same time, or on the flip side, sorry, if it's just sort of a flavor of the week bad guy that they're chasing down, and it really doesn't add anything other than, oh, this is just another scene of Hannibal messing with Will, but not really understanding what, you know, why he's doing it or what he's doing, then it, you know, as viewers, we're just sort of, no, this doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good observation. And that actually is one of the reasons why, but here in America, back during the show's original run, they actually pulled episode 4 because that was scheduled to run the Thursday after the Boston Marathon bombing. And I guess NBC felt that sort of graphic content was inappropriate given what had happened. This is a very American thing to do, that, you know, when something tragic happens, that everyone just kind of goes, you know, oh, we can't do that anymore because we can't. But in that episode, what they ended up doing was putting all the relationship scenes on the website, on the Hannibal website. So and that was actually, for me, the episode that kind of birthed the murder family, as it is known. But that lost episode is actually available on iTunes and also on the DVD set. And I have it, I just haven't watched it yet, which is a crime. But all right, so it sounds like this is a good point for us to go on. So yeah, so the focus of the show is Will and Hannibal and their relationship. And I think Tori has done a very good summation of it, you know, in episodes we've done on Suits and Madness. So I don't know if you want to sort of start off talking about that, Tori.
Talking about between Hannibal and Will?
Yeah.
So are we talking in, like, the context of the show or more as a fandom romantic context?
Both. Like you can.
All right. Yeah. So I think Hannibal and Will's relationship, obviously, it is the crux of the show. Like, it's what makes the show, which is really interesting because that's not something that's very common in American television. I feel we don't have a lot of shows which are based off of like relationship oriented. Of course, I've talked about Breaking Bad a couple times because that's a show I'm interested in, and there's definitely a large component of it is the relationship between two main characters, but at the same time, that's not really the driving force of the plot. So with Hannibal, you have this very interesting situation where Hannibal has sort of sees Will as, like, I feel almost as a worthy opponent in a way, that he's very interested in Will, and there's a lot of speculation that he wants Will to be the one to catch him. He respects Will, and he doesn't really respect other human beings. So I
look at this. For some reason, there are certain conversations between him and Will that lead me to think it's not just he sees him as a worthy opponent, but I think he also cares about him because when he talks to his own sort of psychiatrist, I can't remember the name of the character,
yeah,
the one
Bedelia.
played by Gillian Anderson, yeah, and he describes Will as the closest thing he has to a best friend. So it's a really bizarre sort of thing to watch because as much as he sort of obviously Will is in the business to catch people like him, and obviously if there is some mutual respect, there's also that I think an element of he actually I think he almost obtains him a little bit at some point. I don't know where it was, but there was a moment when they were talking and he kind of I mean, obviously this all changed after the episode where he speaks to Will's doctor and they decide to play a little bit of God and see, well, what would happen if we just let the ticking time bomb keep ticking?
Mm-hmm.
But up until that point, I almost genuinely believed that he actually cared about him as well. Like he saw him as a friend. And maybe it wasn't until Will starts to prove to be really good at what he did and Hannibal starts to think, well, this could possibly be the man who discovers my secret and takes me down, that, I think he actually genuinely cared about him.
Oh, that's a really interesting take on it, that at a certain point Will proved his how dangerous he could actually be to Hannibal.
He cared about like a little puppy, like you do, and I think, he was a smart little puppy, but as soon as he proved that, he really was a lot smarter than most people were giving him credit for, that, that's when Hannibal started to see, oh, he's actually quite dangerous, and then started to distance himself.
Huh.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, like, that he was like a puppy, because that was almost the phrasing I was going to use, that Hannibal sees himself as not really being the same as other people, almost in a god-type way, and to him, Will is like his favorite pet, or something like that. That's how I feel that Hannibal thinks of Will as. But at the same time, I've also seen some interesting meta about this idea that Hannibal knows that eventually he will have to be captured, and he wants Will to be the only person to do that.
Yeah, that would be in keeping with the really warped relationship they have. I think that something that Tori and I have talked about is how Hannibal is this playwright or this director, and he's sort of giving everyone stage direction. But the thing is that he's writing the play as it goes along. He changes. He changes his ideas. And this is something that was mentioned in the interview with Mads Mikkelsen, is that, he sort of pivots all the time and makes things up as he goes along, and is willing to change his game plan for people, but he is the puppet master.
I've always got the idea that Will is sort of an experiment for Hannibal. He's just playing with him, I think. That's always the feeling I've got.
Is it protege? Does that sort of sound about right? He sees him almost like it's a combination of he wants to teach Will, but at the same time he doesn't want him to surpass the teacher. What's the sort of general feeling on Crawford, on Laurence Fishburne's character?
Yeah, mean Uncle Jack. I think that Jack is he's someone who wants to get the job done by any means necessary, and he just can't understand why Will can't just pull himself together.
He doesn't understand weakness. That's what I get. He doesn't understand why Will can't just keep on doing what he's doing.
That's how I see him. He goes around. It's really weird because in the book, Crawford is he's very no nonsense. He's still got that sort of type of personality, but at the same time, he's not absent-minded, but he goes about sort of. He reminds me very much like William Peterson's portrayal of Grissom in at CSI Las Vegas. He's very much put his head down, get his work done, and he doesn't understand why people, have so much trouble, with he doesn't, relationships don't play a part in his work. And that's sort of how Crawford came across me in the books. But for some reason, Laurence Fishburne, and this might just be because he tends to play those sort of characters where they are very passionate, driven in their work. And he seems to kind of, at least in my view, he seems to almost steamroller Will a little bit. And it's not until the damage has been done that he pulls back and he goes, oh, wow, okay, Will's not being able to take this. Maybe I shouldn't have pushed him.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. To me, Jack is that person that, so many of us, I mean, just get a little personal. Tori knows about this. After the birth of my son, I got really severe postpartum depression, and I've actually been getting treatment for that pretty much, like since he was born. So the better part of this year. And you have those people in your life, like anyone who's dealt with depression or another major mental health issue. We all have that one person in our lives who is like, well, can't you just get over this? Can't you just
stop being
yeah. Yes. And I feel like Jack is that person for Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. He is very much that person.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse that you can tell someone in that kind of mindset than, well, have you just tried stopping feeling this way? Have you? Well, of course I have. I have morning, noon, and night. And it's...
Can't you just start feeling happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
stop realizing what
and then you want to hit them.
Well, I mean, the thing that gets me about Will's situation is he's walking into crime scenes that would rattle. I mean, like you guys, this is a convention you hear on American news all the time, is when there's a particularly heinous or grisly crime, some police officer who's speaking to the media will say, I haven't seen anything this bad in my 25 years on the force. And every single crime that Will sees is that crime, basically. That makes the hardened police officer just, leave the crime scene and go cry in the squad car.
Yeah.
And for Jack to just sort of be like, and, knowing that Will has this, for lack of a better term, abnormal brain chemistry. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Jack develops as a character going forward, now that he's seen what he's done. And also, we're also going to, probably deal with the fact that his wife Bella is going to die before the end of the series.
I do wonder how much that might actually bear on his relationship with Will, because obviously, like you say, Jack is that sort of person who just kind of goes, well, can't you just stop feeling what you're feeling, which is making you feel bad? And obviously, with the death of his wife, who, he's admitted he loves her, and he doesn't know how he will live without her, and yet at the same time he has no idea how to relate to her. How with her passing, how will that affect his relationship with Will? Because all of a sudden he himself will be in that position where, well, how do you just stop feeling what you're feeling and just get on with what needs to be done?
Nadine, I think you're actually really smart. You're just pretending that you aren't, because that's a really excellent observation.
I'm really good at faking it.
Yeah, another part, I guess we can sort of turn to the romantic aspects of the show now, many of which are sort of like in the fandom's minds. Tori, did you want to go ahead and kick that off again?
Do you want me to talk about my pet ship, or do you want me to do an overview?
If you could just start with an overview, and then we can get into...
Yeah, that's probably the best idea for everyone.
I'm going to show my ignorance now at this point. What the hell is shipping? I have no idea.
Oh, it's the best part of any TV or movie. It's when you as a fan, you as a viewer, imagine a relationship between two characters, regardless of whether or not there's any apparent chemistry there.
You grab two characters by the back of the head and you squish them together and yell, "Now kiss!"
Thank you for that very disturbing
That sounds very accurate.
And I watched the first season of Hannibal, and that's the most disturbing thing I've ever heard.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
So, I guess what you would call the juggernaut ship for Hannibal is definitely Hannibal x Will. It's just really popular. The creators definitely egg on the fans a lot with this idea. You know, Mass has said in interviews like that Hannibal loves Will, like it is, and also Brian Fuller, like it is a bromance. There's a definite, and I believe because their relationship is so close and intimate and twisted, there is definitely almost an underlying tension that could be linked to romantic tension, and that's a lot of people have jumped on with that. There's a lot of stuff. The one thing that personally bothers me with the Hannibal Will ship is that a lot of it is about a very, very dominant Hannibal and a very passive Will, and I don't feel that so well fits with the way that Will is portrayed within the show, because he is shown as being the mongoose, that he is actually capable of pretty great strength and mental fortitude in times that he's really called upon to show it. So I feel that a lot of the times in fan work, when Hannibal Will is depicted, it shows a very, like, passive, like, just colloquially, like, bottoming. Will is always the bottom in those sort of fan works. So I think it'll be interesting to see as time goes on whether.
I was just going to say, just before Tori sort of went into the next part, I was just going to say, I'm not going to say where I have this information from, but I mean, there are aspects of Will's, his character's makeup that make me think he probably. He probably is spends most of his time at the top, but when it comes to his relationship with Hannibal, at least at his most vulnerable, when Hannibal has really kind of got his head screwed on backwards, that I think he could realistically be a bottom in that relationship. But again, I think it just comes down to the fact that before Will realizes how truly dangerous Hannibal is, I think he quite happily followed him down the primrose path, and because of that, I think that he could quite possibly be the bottom to Hannibal's top.
Because Hannibal gave him an outlet for all these feelings. I mean, it's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype for a reason, that very driven type A people, like the whole thing about the businessman who visits a dominatrix, you need an outlet. You need someone to order you around because you're so used to holding it all together and being the one on top. Yeah.
But there's also the fact that before Hannibal, I think to a certain extent, Will kind of had a bit of an arrogance about him because he did think about crimes differently. He was able to understand the bad guys a lot better. So to a certain extent, he was walking around like, I'm the shit, and I think that's why I see him being a bottom to Hannibal, only because he, all of a sudden he found someone who obviously finds out too late, who is maybe that little bit smarter than him.
Mm-hmm.
Because he fooled him into thinking he's a completely normal, credible doctor, where in fact he is just the worst kind of monster because he gets in your head. And he just turns everything upside down. Everything that you thought you knew is completely out the window.
Another thing about Will is, we do see these glimmers of arrogance from him and petulance throughout the season. I'm thinking mainly of the episode Buffet Freud, where he does actually really contaminate the crime scene, and Jack takes him out. Well, he goes outside and Jack follows him, and Will ends up snapping at him. Do you know anyone else who does this job better well than I do broken? And it's very petulant and very very much him lashing out, but it's also him just being like, I'm the shit,
Don't scold me in front of everybody, or they won't. They'll really. That's why they think I'm crazy, because you're scolding me.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good segue into the way that Will interacts with other people in the show, mainly Alana and Beverly. Alana being presented as his main love interest in the show, even though, and this is something I'm going to hand over to Tori briefly because she's really done a good analysis of it before, is, he and Alana have this dynamic where they're obviously very attracted to each other, but that Alana knows too much about Will that she just can't, she won't let herself cross that line. But then Beverly is very different. Did you want to pick that up there, Tori?
Sure. Something I've talked about in the past in the Suits and Madness podcast is how Alana and Will's relationship is in a lot of ways a foil to Beverly and Will's relationship. Quick disclosure, I am crazy about Beverly and Will. It is my ship. I will defend it to the death. But so starting off, I feel like a lot of Alana and Will's relationship, it's portrayed in a very interesting way because most television shows, you have the female lead, who is, we're going to say for the sake of this conversation, Alana. You have the male lead, who is Will, despite the name of the show, and they hook up, and that's how the general television formula goes. And in the case of Will and Alana, it gets subverted very well because they have this attraction to each other, but they're not comfortable with each other, and that's discussed a lot in the very first episode. It's made a point that they've never been in a room alone together, and they have like these weird kissy times, and they just always end in both people, like, you can tell that Alana and Will are always unhappy after they have some sort of romantic encounter with each other because it just doesn't quite seem to feel right to them. They don't mesh very well in that way. And even though they're both attracted to each other and they have this romantic tension between each other, they accept this idea that both of them are not in the right mental state to perhaps be together. And that's something that you really don't see portrayed a lot in television shows, this sort of realistic take on that kind of romance where you realize you might like someone, but you're not right for each other. And then when we contrast with Beverly and Will, which has been, much to my delight, ship-teased by Brian Fuller via Twitter for next season, they're very, very comfortable around each other, first of all. I started shipping them almost immediately when we have the scene where there's Katz and Will in the gun range and they're all up on each other doing the different poses and stuff. And, like, up until that point, we really don't see Will acting like a normal person with anyone else. He has this, like, he has a lot of personal space around him all the time. He never really gets, like, physically close to people. And then when he's with Katz, they're right up next to each other. They're, doing an activity together. And then we see time and time again in every episode, when Will and Katz are together, they're often physically close to each other, which is a definite distinction between the way Will is with most other people. And oftentimes he calls upon Katz when there's something that happens. I'm going to forget the episode name right now, but when he goes to George's house and or the house that Georgia committed the murder in, and he realizes that he sees Georgia, the first person he calls is Katz because she's the person he knows isn't going to judge him and think of him as crazy. And that's why I really like their relationship, and I'm hoping that it builds into something more canon over time, because they're just shown as being two people who really get along and are comfortable around each other. And I think Katz is very supportive of Will, but at the same time, she doesn't treat him... Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to finish up the thought. She doesn't treat him like someone who is needing of support, but when he needs her, she's there.
She's probably the closest thing I'd say to a friend that he has on the team. Because, you've got Alana, who is very much sort of the way she reacts to him is very much tied into her feelings for him. And then you've got Crawford, who is sort of the bulldog of the team and just sort of work, get things done. And then you've got Hannibal, who is trying to sort of manipulate him. It seems almost like Kat is the only one who just genuinely, just all she wants is for Will to be happy. And I think that's probably why he's so comfortable around her, is that even though at times it doesn't seem like he sees her as a romantic partner, but at the same time, that their relationship is the most healthy, I suppose, of all of the relationships that he has.
Yeah. Because
it's so natural between them. And I think part of it is because she genuinely doesn't want to see him hurt. She just wants him to be happy and healthy. And there's none of the sort of overwhelming romantic feelings. They're not. Nothing is sort of, oh my God, I can't catch my breath around you kind of, thing that maybe Alana Bloom kind of stuff. Because to a certain extent, in some cases, the two of them come like when Will and Alana are in the room together, they come across sometimes as very sort of like teenagers in love. You know, it's like doomed romantically kind of thing, but they will forever be each other's, you know, first loves kind of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that take on it. Yeah, and for sure for season 2, as Tori already said, it has been mentioned, I think, by Brian Fuller that you know, we're going to see some new depths or something to that effect of the relationship between Katz and Will.
I'm just reading off of the sort of TV.com the description of the show, and there's this really, it just says members of the behavioral science unit include Beverly Katz, who specializes in fibers. She always treats Will like everyone else and not someone special, something he appreciates. And I think that actually sums it up beautifully. She doesn't see him as the whiz kid. She doesn't see him as the broken one. She just sees him as Will.
Well, there is your validation, Tori. There you go. It's on TV.com. Nadia, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I'm all for Beverly and Will. I think that's my favorite pairing. They're very different, and yet they're very comfortable with each other. So I think it's with Alana, they're just so uncomfortable. I don't think anything's going to come of it, and it's too predictable.
I also do like the idea of Beverly and Katz. So it seems like we're all in agreement here about that. That no one's going to jump in and be like, no, Will and Alana for these reasons. I personally think that we might actually end up seeing a romance between Alana and Hannibal going forward. That's something that's been on my mind a lot since the end of season 1. I don't know if anyone wanted to speculate on what might happen going forward between any of the characters based on what we've seen. I mean, other than Katz and Will.
Yeah, I think Hannibal and Alana, it is very possible because, you know, she trusts him. I mean, she's trusted him with Will, who seems to be a pretty close friend. And I think he's been her mentor at some point. So I think it's definitely possible. And I think the fallout from when she realizes what Hannibal is could be very interesting. Considering that she's known him for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I keep on going back to the episode Sorbet, but for me, so many important things happened in that episode that just, that when he's helping her when she's helping him get ready for his dinner party, and they're like cutting up vegetables and whatnot in his kitchen, and they're reminiscing about when she was a PhD candidate, I think. And she says something to the effect of, you know, people, all our students thought we were having an affair. Why didn't we? Oh, no. Hannibal says that to her. And instead of answering him, she says, you were already having an affair, which to me says that she would have been all for it if he hadn't already been involved with someone else. Which to me, like, that is like a classic, what's known in fandom as a ship tease, where like either one of the show's cast or crew or an actual, you know, something on the show itself hints at a coming relationship between two characters. But like the main takeaway there was that they might still in the future, and then I want to know, who was he having the relationship with at the time, and are we ever going to meet that person?
Can he have a normal relationship? I mean, as in a normal romantic relationship?
Well, I mean, in interviews with Mads Mikkelsen, where he's talking about the character, he has said, you know, Hannibal loves women. He's a very sensual person. He enjoys having a good time. He's a man who is living his best life. But
does he end up eating them? I mean, you know, he enjoys them and then he eats them. That's possible, right?
Only if they piss him off. That's
okay. So basically, you can't break up with him. You just once you start going out with him, you have to, you know, it's forever.
But I think that he appreciates people who do things according to this very old-fashioned code of politeness and conduct, where if a woman were to sit him down, over a glass of wine and say, and put her hand on his knee and say, you know what, we've had a wonderful time, but I really am looking for something different or something, as long as she were to do it in the polite way, as opposed to, leaving in the morning before he got up and like leaving a Post-it note on the fridge, I think she'd be okay. Believe it or not.
Yeah. It was me, I would just,
Sorry, Nadia.
No, I'm just saying if it was me, I would, not take the chance at all.
But you wouldn't know. You would just know him as this extremely charming.
Yeah, I wouldn't. But if I did know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you did know, I mean, nobody would get, within 10 feet of him. Which, I mean, later on in the series, which is if they manage to make it this far, it's going to be really interesting to see because, I mean, since either I think all of us are familiar enough with the books and movies that we know that Hannibal, basically drops the act after a certain point and, physically assaults people, in prison like guards and whatnot every chance he gets.
He does end up in a relationship, sort of a relationship with Clarice Starling.
Well, no,
but I think that was more of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he loses the mask before that because at the beginning of Red Dragon, Crawford is going to visit Will at his home.
Yeah.
Everybody's read the book, and he's basically Will has left the behavioral analysis unit simply because Hannibal tried to sort of gut him. And
yes.
he bears the scar, sort of that he's that basically Hannibal's tried to eviscerate him. So I mean, the mask is obviously dropped long before he meets Clarice Starling, and even before he actually gets into prison, because obviously it's in his capture that's when Will is injured.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's probably going to be represented in the show as that moment from when he stops being so debonair and just starts being like, yeah, I just ate that guy's face. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, we're just a bunch of girls talking about murder. Good times.
And cannibalism. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that is a big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're just sort of as an aside, one of the great things about this show is it is such challenging material, but it really proves that there is an audience out there, that people want to delve into these darker parts of human nature and really talk about it. It's, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely a thing.
I think we're always interested in sort of the thing that I can't remember what I'm a big fan of Criminal Minds, and obviously the question, there's one of the episodes where he sort of if you're familiar with the characters from Criminal Minds, there's Dr. Reed, who's the youngest of the team. They call him Doctor sort of out of respect, but I don't think he actually has a doctorate, and he's dealing with the team leader, and he says to Hodge, why is everybody so interested in what we do? What is it that's so newsworthy about sort of serial killers and I think Hodge just puts it really beautifully. Is sort of serial killers are sort of that side of us that exists in all of us, that we're interested in why that person turned that way they did. Why is that guy gone to the dark side? And because they're talking about the episode, this person who quite literally in the span of 6 months goes from normal guy with a wife and kids and a job, and sort of gradually sort of his life just really goes wrong. And by the end of it, in 6 months, he's become a serial killer. And it's sort of like that idea that, our grasp of sort of normality and, what we consider to be right and wrong can be stripped away from us. under the right circumstances. And I think that's what people, when they get fascinated by serial killers, people like Hannibal, it's not that, we're attracted to the evil. It's just that it's, we're curious. How does somebody go from normal, upstanding citizen to dangerous psychopath who eats people?
Yeah, and also the idea that any one of us has that capacity.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, they're not born that way, it's circumstances and just events that, drive them into it. And it's just like Ernie said, we're just curious about why they ended up doing what they did.
Hey guys, I actually have to get going now, so this is Tori. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost done. I just want to talk a little bit about the online fandom and then pretty much wrap up. So yeah, if you have to get going, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm disconnecting from the call now, but it was really great to talk to all of you.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
it's really great to see you.
Nice talking to you, Tori.
Okay, talk to you later. Okay, bye.
Bye, Tori.
All right. Well, the other thing I wanted to mention about, the motive for people being interested in shows like this is, I don't know if you guys have seen that old movie Chinatown with a very young Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
There's that great line that says, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and at the right place, they're capable of anything. I think that's just really, really sums up very well the fascination with this sort of material. That that none of us want to think about that, so it's a safe way for us to sort of delve into that side of humanity. But to sort of start wrapping things up here, I did want to talk about the online fandom, because Hannibal is very much a niche fandom. It's not super popular like Criminal Minds or Bones or Law and Order. And I know, for example, I only found fellow fans of it by going online. Tori and I are actually online friends. We already met. We met a couple years ago through fanfiction.net, and then every other person, including you guys, who I know likes the show, are all internet friends. There's no one in my real 3D life that likes it.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky that my husband also watched it with me. We do have quite a bit of similar taste when it comes to TV. But yeah, I mean, other than you guys, I mean, he can't be bothered to sit down and talk to me about it. But and just to sort of just to discuss what I've seen, sometimes I do find myself sort of going over the internet, and I know that there was discussion that originally sort of started on the podcast Ice and Fire forum, sort of about this program, and sort of it's like, oh my God, if you've seen this new show Hannibal, it's so graphic, but the stories are good and the characters are amazing, and yeah, there is this enthusiasm for the show, which I literally didn't see until I'd gone online and started talking about it, and then other people started to respond and say, yeah, I've seen this show, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that is exactly my experience, and I think that this is a real example of how the internet now plays a role in the popularity of TV shows and movies, especially ones that are trying to do something very, very different, like Hannibal. That the only way you are going to commiserate with other fans is by going online to Tumblr, to a forum, and the joke on Tumblr is that the Hannibal fandom like just sprung up overnight. And I've actually thought long and hard about this, and the reasons, as far as I'm concerned, is that people needed the outlet. And Tumblr, if you guys are familiar with it, it's people can post pictures and GIFs and quotes, and to translate such a visually rich show onto a visually rich sharing platform, it was a match made in heaven. So that's why I think that it really, the fandom developed as quickly and as strongly as it did.
It's kind of sad in my eyes, because I'm thinking there's so many shows that came before Hannibal that had they been sort of around when the internet really was sort of a big deal, you know, you just think of all the shows that have gone that, you know, they had, like Hannibal, these really just very small, very niche, but really passionate group of fans, whose only link is sort of the social platform, you know, whether it's Tumblr or forums. And I mean, when I saw that, you know, that they were talking about, you know, the fact that they weren't originally, you know, the viewing figures for Hannibal the first season weren't really good enough for NBC to, you know, continue on with it. And then all of a sudden, you know, they, you know, the fans sort of pipe up and say, no, actually, this is programming that we want to continue seeing. And yeah, and all of a sudden, second season, here it comes.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened. Is the show was the industry term is on the bubble, where the ratings are they're not you know, in the trash can, but they're not, you know, great. And the renewal could have gone either way. And this is how smart the people who run Hannibal's official social media are, is they mobilize the Fannibals. They got on Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and said, hey guys, here's our situation. You need to let the network know that the audience is much bigger than they realize. And that's basically what happened. And the fans helped save the show for you know, like that might sound a little corny, but that is pretty much what happened.
I mean, that's so interesting. I mean, that's, you know, that fans can actually influence the future of the show. That's amazing. They make the show so that people can watch it, and if the people that are watching it can actually influence, you know, how long the show goes on, it's amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, like I bought on iTunes. I already bought the first season, which I mean, I never buy TV shows, you know, on DVD or on iTunes, but I bought this one because I want to support it. Yeah, so back to the Hannibal fandom, the Fannibals. One thing that has been on my mind, especially since Comic-Con, where a couple of the actors from the show and the creators basically went and met the fandom face to face for the first time, is, you know, what kind of effect will the fandom have going forward, and is that a good or a bad thing? I think, you know, I mean, all of us are Game of Thrones viewers and readers, and we've seen how the fandom has reacted to things that have happened in the show, changes they've made.
I think because George's books, I think, rely on world building a lot. So we get a lot of descriptions about sceneries and looks and, you know, just the settings. And in Thomas Harris's books, there's not as much. It's more of, you know, it's more of a mystery. It's more about solving the mystery.
Ah, yes.
And I think that's why, because we don't really have that, we don't have the characters' descriptions. We don't really know how they look. We don't know how they're supposed to look. And we don't really have that much of their background either. So, you know, they can make up pretty much anything about Hannibal without affecting the basic storyline.
There you go.
Well, George was creating a world. He was creating a world that nobody had ever seen before. So, I mean, a lot of his details basically came out of the necessity to try and describe what Westeros and Essos were like. Whereas Thomas Harris obviously doesn't have to describe what Florida looks like. We all know what Florida looks like.
No, I mean the characters' faces. I mean, just their physical descriptions as well.
Yeah.
You don't really get as much.
I was just gonna say, I agree with you. And I think part of it is because Harris was more likely. He was more about sort of what people were thinking than sort of how they looked. Like he gave very general descriptions because it wasn't about sort of what color eyes that you know, Jack had or what sort of slacks did Will wear. It was more about sort of what they were thinking. So I mean, they obviously had a lot more artistic license with how it looked.
Exactly. They have more space to move.
Yeah, I've only read so far Hannibal Rising and Red Dragon, and I still have to read Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. But the only character who is really fleshed out, you know, like what they're supposed to look like, is Hannibal himself. And that was pretty much Anthony Hopkins in the movies. and but otherwise, no one is really talked about. They're just described in very everyman sort of terms, and the only real hints we get to their ethnicity or anything like that is maybe like from their names, or when they talk about someone else in their life.
Or even their childhood. Like because obviously you haven't read it, but you do get a little bit of detail with Clarice Starling's character because of the nature of the relationship between her and Hannibal when they meet up. Is he is asking her questions. Like obviously, if you've seen the films, you know that there's a tit for tat. So he will give her information about the serial killer that she's chasing, but only in exchange for information about her childhood. So you do get a little bit of a description about her, but only because it's how the narration reads. Hannibal is directly asking her, or he makes observations about her.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that maybe there might be some expectation about who is ultimately cast as Clarice, but like for example, in the books, Hannibal is described as having red eyes, like an albino. I mean, I guess there's a way you could maybe have like a variation on a red eye if you aren't born with albinism or whatever the actual term for being albino is. But and the fact that they didn't carry that over, everyone's fine with it. But it's just, I think, speaks to, the fact that it's, the solving of the mystery versus the building of the world. When we found out that the purple contact lenses weren't going to work for Danny and her brother, it was kind of like, oh no. Yeah.
And Robert's black hair, I think that was a big deal. It doesn't matter what color his eyes are. We don't care about who his mother was or who his sister was. I mean, whatever they look like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the story.
Exactly. It doesn't change the story. That is the crux of it right there. I mean, like the whole thing with Hannibal having red eyes, it's like a throwaway thing of like, it's still him. And Mads Mikkelsen has made the role his own so much that it's like,
He has.
And that's why he plays him so beautifully, because he's still that very controlled sort of, not even, he doesn't even come across as tightly wound, but that, very tight control over sort of how he appears to everybody.
Yes, the well-tailored person suit, as Bedelia calls it. His therapist. So I do have to get going here pretty soon, but what I wanted to wrap up with is whether or not you guys think that we're going to start seeing the show become self-aware. Like the example I brought up in our outline here was Sherlock, how pretty much in my opinion, all of season 2 was just like fan service contrasted with almost like, resentment of their fan base. Like that they were fully aware of what had happened out there.
Yeah, I think the fans should just stick to, I mean, it's fine influencing, whether the show keeps going, but, actually, if the fans start affecting the storyline, that's just, I still want the show that was in the creator's head, because that's what I fell in love with. So, I want to keep watching that instead of what the fans want to see.
Yeah.
So I think that there should be a limit to how much fans can influence a show.
Yeah, I don't want to see someone walk onto screen wearing a flower crown. I don't want that level. I don't want those little winks and nods, because that's, yeah. I mean, like you talk about being taken out of a show. Wow, that would not be good.
I think a well-placed wink or nod is different from a sort of throwaway one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I do, to a certain extent. I like when you get those tiny ones, but they have to be so subtle and so sort of quick that you think, did I see that? Because then it does sort of leave you with that, it's a nod to the fan. I mean, because I like when shows genuinely, and I mean, when I say genuinely, I mean they're not pandering,
mm-hmm.
but they genuinely show sort of, you kept us here. You are the reason why these shows are still on, because people watch them and people like them, and they like them enough to keep asking for more seasons of them. So I think, when it comes to sort of nods and winks in the show, it's nice when they're very subtly done, and they're done in such a way so that really it's not taken away from the story or anything. It is, like it says, it's just a very short thank you.
Yeah.
I like what Nadia said. I like the idea that, as long as the show writers and the show creators have that sort of very focused, very clear idea of where they want the show to go.
Yeah, to go back to the puppy analogy, it reminds me of this awful apartment that my husband and I lived in when we first moved to San Francisco, where our neighbors were keeping a pit bull puppy in the backyard. And I mean, I don't know. I'm more familiar with like hunting and herding breeds, to be honest, like golden retrievers and things like that. So I didn't realize it was a pit bull. I just saw this very sad dog in our backyard that was being neglected by its owners. And then when I found out it was a pit bull, my view of that animal changed completely because it was unneutered, which actually is illegal in San Francisco to have unneutered pit bulls. So at first it was just like, oh, that poor dog. And then there was that moment of switching to be like, no, we can't play with him because it's, an untrained, dangerous animal. And yeah. So I guess, Hannibal may have had a moment like that with Will. And, that happens, I think that happens a lot in relationships where a person does something or you find out something about them that you never quite look at them the same way
This is off topic and you can cut it. I just had to mention to that with the pit bull revelation. My neighbors, when I lived out in the country, they had a dog that they said was a wolf husky mix that was actually a 100% wolf that they kept in their backyard in a residential neighborhood.
Oops. We also had a wolf husky mix growing up. My mom got it when she was in Alaska years and years ago before I was born, and it looked
No, they
like
bought it
100%
from a wolf
wolf.
breeder.
So who knows? Who knows?
I was just saying, if we're going off topic anyway.
What was that, Nadia?
Pit bulls have gotten a bad rap as bad owners. I knew a friend of mine in Canada had a pit bull, and she was an absolutely lovely, lovely dog. You could approach her, and she was just really well loved, really well trained, and would never, ever, ever, ever be a danger to anybody as long as you treated her with respect, like you would any animal. If you pulled on her ears, or if you pulled on her tail, or if you smacked her around, oh yeah, she'd have a go at you. But as long as you approached her slowly and very careful about sort of how you approached her, she was absolutely lovely. And it's very cute that dogs smell fear. And I mean, I'm one of those people where I think that, the internet being what it is, and the comments we made earlier about sort of, shows like Game of Thrones where HBO weren't making it available to everybody who wanted to, we would gladly pay subscriptions. And one of the ideas that that's been bandied about that I was discussing with my husband was, wouldn't it be great if you could pre-buy the DVD box set, and with that DVD box set you get a special code which lets you log on to a website and you can watch them when they're first broadcast, no matter where you are in the world, as long as you've got an internet connection. So you're not just supporting you're not just supporting the show, by buying these box sets. They're saying thank you for supporting it and giving you that option to watch at the same time, instead of these licensing deals that the fact that these companies still see the world in region. The fact that we had 4 people from 4 different time zones discussing one show, is testament to the fact that the borders don't exist anymore for this sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's just too smart. The executives are still decades away from figuring that out.
I think the executives are probably a lot older, and they're, a little hesitant to.
I think it's the law, because obviously you've got these really old licensing laws. How?
Yeah, it is. It is the laws.
Yeah, I think they should adapt them to to the internet. I mean, the internet has changed a lot of things, and there should be a way to still have licenses and yet be able to launch stuff at the same time around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it would solve piracy. It would solve piracy if
Exactly, exactly.
they just realized what the medium can actually do, of medium of the internet, well, the platform of the internet. Which, I mean, now I'm really starting to think about, what if, a show like Firefly, which is the great lamented.
And that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I still remember when the movie Serenity came out. That was my first date with my husband. We went to go see Serenity. But like, yeah, still to this day, people lament that show. And what if it had premiered, last year instead of a decade ago? How different, how would that have turned out?
I think we would probably still have Firefly
Yeah.
then.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, it's the following is again people who are very internet savvy, and they'd probably be, exerting their influence on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, we're here. Our money is just as green as the person who subscribes to cable.
Exactly. And they should care about the money, not how they're getting the money.
Exactly. Well, eventually, one thing I'm noticing, the trend with both movies and TV is people who are of our generation who are currently like late teens up to, like even into their 40s, people who are much more hip to this technology. They're the ones who are now in charge of writing the shows, of producing and directing the movies, of the behind the scenes work. And that's why we're getting such great movies now, like The Avengers, for example, and the most recent Batman movies, is because the people who grew up with this stuff are now in charge. And they're going to make sure that it gets done right. So I have hope for the future, but just not the immediate future.
And they don't veer off of that, trying to think that, well, maybe if we pander, then more people will watch it. No, because let's face it, it would be nice if they picked up more fans, but it'd be better if they picked up more fans based on the strength of the show as it is, as opposed to, well, let's see how many other people we can rake into this, and the level of the show just sort of dropping off.
If any show on TV is capable of doing a very subtle little hat tip to its fans, it's Hannibal. So if they do it, we can only hope that it's done in the most subtle, clever, not obtrusive way possible.
I really hope that more people sort of after listening to this sort of turn it on and see what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, the DVDs are out there. It's on iTunes. So yeah, I think that all of us, including Tori, would say watch it now. And
read the books. Read the books are good.
Yes. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I think we also ended up including a little preview of the Sherlock episode that VOK will do eventually, but we'll talk about that down the line.
I think that'll be a couple of months away. So if anyone wants to join in, just enter on the forums.
Yeah, if you want to hear me ranting about how bad Sherlock season 2 was, just where to find me.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
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 Yeah, to go back to the puppy analogy, it reminds me of this awful apartment that my husband and I lived in when we first moved to San Francisco, where our neighbors were keeping a pit bull puppy in the backyard. And I mean, I don't know. I'm more familiar with like hunting and herding breeds, to be honest, like golden retrievers and things like that. So I didn't realize it was a pit bull. I just saw this very sad dog in our backyard that was being neglected by its owners. And then when I found out it was a pit bull, my view of that animal changed completely, because it was unneutered, which actually is illegal in San Francisco to have unneutered pit bulls. So at first it was just like, oh, that poor dog. And then there was that moment of switching to be like, no, we can't play with him because it's, an untrained, dangerous animal. And yeah. So I guess, Hannibal may have had a moment like that with Will. And, that happens. I think that happens a lot in relationships where a person does something, or you find out something about them that you never quite look at them the same way
This
again.
is off topic and you can cut it. I just had to mention to that with the pit bull revelation. My neighbors, when I lived out in the country, they had a dog that they said was a wolf husky mix that was actually a 100% wolf that they kept in their backyard in a residential neighborhood.
Oops. We also had a wolf husky mix growing up. My mom got it when she was in Alaska years and years ago before I was born, and it looked
like
like
a
100%
breeder.
wolf. So who knows? Who knows?
I was just saying, if we're going off topic anyway.
What was that, Nadia?
Pit bulls have gotten a bad rap as bad owners. I knew a friend of mine in Canada had a pit bull, and she was an absolutely lovely, lovely dog. You could approach her, and she was just really well loved, really well trained, and would never, ever, ever, ever be a danger to anybody as long as you treated her with respect, like you would any animal. If you pulled on her ears, or if you pulled on her tail, or if you smacked her around, oh yeah, she'd have a go at you. But as long as you approached her slowly and very careful about sort of how you approached her, she was absolutely lovely. And it's very true that dogs smell fear. And I mean, I'm one of those people where I think that, the internet being what it is, and the comments we made earlier about sort of, shows like Game of Thrones where HBO weren't making it available to everybody who wanted to, we would gladly pay subscriptions. And one of the ideas that that's been bandied about that I was discussing with my husband was, wouldn't it be great if you could pre-buy the DVD box set? And with that DVD box set, you get a special code which lets you log on to a website, and you can watch them when they're first broadcast, no matter where you are in the world, as long as you've got an internet connection. So you're not just supporting you're not just supporting the show, by buying these box sets. They're saying thank you for supporting it, and giving you that option to watch at the same time, instead of these licensing deals that the fact that these companies still see the world in regions. The fact that we had 4 people from 4 different time zones discussing one show, is testament to the fact that the borders don't exist anymore, like for this sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's just too smart. The executives are still decades away from figuring that out.
I think the executives are probably a lot older, and they're a little hesitant to.
I think it's the law, because obviously you've got these really old licensing laws. How?
Yeah, it is. It is the laws.
Yeah, I think they should adapt them to to the internet. I mean, the internet has changed a lot of things, and there should be a way to still have licenses and yet be able to launch stuff at the same time around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it would solve piracy. It would solve piracy if they just realized what the medium can actually do, medium of the internet, well, the platform of the internet. Which, I mean, now I'm really starting to think about, what if, a show like Firefly, which is the great lamented.
That's what I was.
Yeah, yeah. I still remember when the movie Serenity came out. That was my first date with my husband. We went to go see Serenity. But still to this day, people lament that show. And what if it had premiered, last year instead of a decade ago? How different, how would that have turned out?
I think we would probably still have Firefly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, the following is again people who are very internet savvy, and they'd probably be, exerting their influence on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, we're here. Our money is just as green as the person who subscribes to cable.
Exactly. Yeah. And they should care about the money, not how they're getting the money.
Exactly. Well, eventually, one thing I'm noticing, the trend with both movies and TV, is people who are of our generation, who are currently like late teens up to, even into their 40s, people who are much more hip to this technology. They're the ones who are now in charge of writing the shows, of producing and directing the movies, of the behind-the-scenes work. And that's why we're getting such great movies now, like The Avengers, for example, and the most recent Batman movies, is because the people who grew up with this stuff are now in charge, and they're going to make sure that it gets done right. So I have hope for the future, but just not the immediate future.